All right, guys, pleased to say I am back with Mike Tromello on a second edition with me on the Breaking Muscle podcast. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful day in California, about 75 degrees, sunny, blue skies.
He knows I'm sat in the dark in London. Even though the days are a little bit longer, it's 9 o'clock here and it is dark, but we had some half decent weather at some point in the last week or so, which is good for us. So not quite living the dream as California weather, but we're doing all right. And yeah, Mike, we had a quick chat off air. Everything's going great business wise for you. Things are back up and running and progressing nicely.
Yeah, everything's fantastic. Like I was telling you earlier, we were up 30% business wise, and we're going inside, outside, just a small mask requirement, but everything's really starting to return to normal out here.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really good to hear. It gives us hope, sort of, wherever you are in the world, whatever the situation is, hopefully things will start picking up. So nice to get a positive start there. Now, what we're going to talk about today, we're going to sort of focus in a topic that Mike did an article for Breaking Muscle a little while ago and some videos that accompanied it about Redline and getting comfortable being uncomfortable, and that was from like a CrossFit perspective. We're going to look at that and the different heart rate zones, what they mean, so everyone understands what we're on, and then I want to apply that maybe to different sports scenarios and just to the general lifter, and that's our topic for today. We'll stay relatively tight on that, guys. Lots of content crammed in, loads of info coming from Mike, and then we'll let you crack on with your day. So Mike, first of all, can you give us those heart rate zones you got on medium, high, peak? Those what those terms mean, and obviously there's specific to the individual, but some broad framework to go with.
So I'll just break it down for like the generalized, because obviously it's going to be very specific to the athlete with their resting heart rate and their age and all that stuff, right? So what I do is I use an algorithm. I use an algorithm on my computer.
Easy for you to say.
Algorithm. On my computer, which essentially takes, the basic stuff with 220 minus their age, etc. But I go a step further, and I won't say what that is because it's mine, but I'll break it down for that individualized person based on heart rate zones, right? So zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, max heart rate. Now you can look online, there might be more zones based on that, but that's how I do it. And it's very self-explanatory, very easy to understand for the athlete, because you don't want to get too complicated because they're trying to work out, not trying to do math the whole time.
Yes.
And they were heart rate monitor. And zone 1, you're just cruising. Like we're pretty much in a resting heart rate state right now talking. But if we get our heart rate up, say we're talking, we get really fired up about something, our heart rate might spike, right? Might hit zone 1, or you're just getting on the bike, just walking to your car, zone 1 heart rate might in that. Zone 2 is like kind of like your workout state, your steady state cardio, I'm going to do a 40-minute a calorie row, 40-minute run, etc. And you have a nice controlled heart rate that you and I can have a conversation the entire time, right? Depends on who you are. It could be somewhere between 135 and 155 beats a minute, somewhere in that range. And then you got your zone 3, which pushes to redline. And zone 3 is high heart rate. You're maxing it out. You're breathing heavy. It hurts. You're kind of getting scared. You might hit fight or flight, right? And redline essentially is what I call, for lack of better words, fight or flight. It's where you hit that spot in your heart rate in that 160 something to 180 beats, depending on who you are. And you're like, oh gosh, I need to stop or slow down or not do what I'm doing. The best athletes in the world can push through that, knowing they can recover, and based on what they're doing movement wise, running wise, etc. The ones that can't are the ones that hit flight and they back off and they say, I can't, oh my gosh, this is too much. And that is essentially a zone training in a nutshell, is training athletes to hit redline, train in redline, hit or stay within zone 3 into redline, and not really go into zone 2 too much unless they need to be in zone 2. That's it in a nutshell.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense. I think that's pretty clear for anyone listening, what we're working with here. So quick thing. So if we're talking that middle zone, you mentioned you could have a conversation. So that's a really useful thing for people to take away. I think if they're not used to using a heart rate monitor, or maybe if they don't have a heart rate monitor, they can assess themselves to some extent there. Like it's not chatting like you and I are now, but you can just about hold a conversation. Probably on that threshold, is it fair to say that you might sort of you're out of breath holding that conversation, but you can get words out and be vaguely coherent.
Yeah, if I say, Tom, what's your name? You'll be like, Tom, we're good. you can talk. Now I will say this, and you and I have both been at red zone before, I'm sure, where if I yell your name, you're like, ugh. Say your name. Ugh. Yeah. You're not saying anything. Yeah. You're focused on you.
Just make it stop is what you're focused on.
Yeah, make it stop.
So you talked about, obviously, any competitive athlete that has some kind of conditioning component, this is going to be useful. But obviously, to CrossFit, this is going to be really, really important, and separate people. Those that can go on and compete at higher levels can hang out in that red zone and tolerate that. And also, I suppose something else is, to some extent, recover back and in and out of that zone. Whereas some people, they kind of, I think, like, you said flight, but like freak out, and it's basically everything goes to shit and it all falls apart. The wheels come off, and they're done. I suppose, well, with anything, it's trainable, and there's presumably some genetic component. Have you seen that some people, it just seems like they just tolerate this inherently, they can handle this better than individual B?
100%. Like I don't want to say genetics doesn't play a significant role in this. It does. Can you train it? Yes, you can. I mean, can you be an athlete with subpar athletic ability and train this to be significantly better? Yeah. But there's athletes out there that are incredible. Matt Frazier is a great example of the CrossFit Games champion. If you ever look at his program, I actually purchased it. It was fantastic to look at. He's a brilliant, really brilliant programmer, better than I've seen of all the great athletes that put their programming out there. Probably one of the most scientific based, a lot of heart rate training. Mm-hmm. A lot of zone work. And it's funny because I do a lot of that with my athletes, but they hate it because it's not sexy, it's not fun, but it's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And he does a ton of it, and it's incredible to see him. He puts zone 2 and he says exactly where you should be and how it should feel, and it's amazing. And it makes so much sense, right? If you're doing a CrossFit Games event and you're pushing the red line, but you can now find, let's just say you're doing Fran, right? Everyone knows Fran, 21, 15, 9, thrusters and pull-ups, right? And you're good at pull-ups. Let's just say, so your heart rate's going to spike, but if you can find a way to hit red line and then rest on the thrusters and bring your heart rate back down to a low zone 3, that's recovery in motion. And that's what the best athletes in CrossFit are able to do. I have another athlete, which everyone knows very well, Hunter Mcintyre, who's an amazing OCR racer, right? He's won the High Rocks Championship. He's going to probably win the Worlds again this year. He's fantastic. And he is insane. He does a ton of zone work, ton of heart rate training. He knows exactly where he is in space all the time. He's a genetic freak. Mm-hmm. I've had some athletes that are high regional level athletes in CrossFit, and they have had to work it. They've had to work recovery. They've had to work the zones. They've really had to put a lot of focus into it. And they're amazing athletes, and they are in the top 1% of CrossFit. Obviously, the CrossFit's taking the top 1% of the 1%, right, to the games. But so like the difference between them and say the people that are making the top 5 going to the games is that ability to stay redline and recover in a middle of a workout. And whoever can recover their heart rate the fastest can go. And I say breaths a lot to the athletes. I've seen athletes literally hit red line, back off whatever it is they're doing, and you can count their breaths. 1, 2, 3, and they're recovered and they're back on the bar. Whereas other athletes are like 1,001, 1,002, 1,008, and then they're back on the bar. And that 5-second difference now is the difference between over 5 or 6 breaks, a minute. 30 seconds. And in CrossFit, every second truly does count at the highest of levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking that from, like, obviously my background was rugby, a guy that getting into the defensive position is just that half a yard too late, that recovery, getting up off the floor, getting into position. That's a team that they've made a break and the opposition's in behind, maybe scoring a try. So, see how that applies and obviously to different sports, that concept. So you've talked about, it is something you can train. So, without being, the binding obvious of you have to push yourself into that red line. How does one go about, getting used to this and getting past that freaking out and learning to manage it? Some of it, I'm sure, is just being in that zone and you realize that, okay, I'm not going to die here. But there's obviously a lot more art and science to it when you're putting it together to get your, guys and girls to that level.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of, depending on athletes, very specific, but what I like to start a lot of athletes on is something called a zone row. So 20-minute row, right? And you wear a heart rate monitor and you know what you got to do. So you're going to spend the first 4 minutes or so of that row, zone 2, target zone 2 heart rate, right? And then you're going to alternate 1 minute full on sprints with 2-minute breaks. Full on sprints are trying to hit zone 3 to red line. And then the 2-minute rest, you're trying to bring your heart rate back to zone 2. And in doing that, you're going to time how long it takes for your heart rate to hit that level. And the more you do this, the more specific, the easier your body's going to recover. And that's a very specific way to do that, right? It's on a row. You can do that on a run. You could run doing that as well. You could swim, but it's kind of hard to see it. You could also do it on an assault bike, which is going to be a little harder, right? Or a bike of some sort, because it's going to, other factors like lactic threshold come into play, which is a whole nother conversation, but that's going to come into play. And then there's other ways to do it with my top athletes that I kind of keep to myself, but I have been playing around a lot with it, and I really like it with long EMOMs. 30 to 40 minutes in length, because it's going to push them in that. That's a long time, and they might be crushing it for 15 minutes. And then the next 15 to 20 minutes, they're all of a sudden, they're in that zone 3 the entire time, trying to stay with the EMOM. And if you can find that sweet spot as a programmer, what's going to push them to about 40 to 50 seconds of work for each minute, with only 10 seconds essentially of rest or transitional time between each movement that they're doing the EMOM, you can essentially keep them in zone 3 working the red line the entire time. And the better they get at holding those EMOMs, the better they're going to be in a CrossFit workout at a high level.
Yeah, interesting. That makes sense. There's a colleague of mine, I might butcher this a little bit. I'm fairly certain his strategy is essentially he pushes people to 85% of their heart rate max. They hit that, then the recovery is just as long as it takes them for that to, he has described it, I can't remember the exact number he has, if I'm honest, off the top of my head, but he's like, it's when it drops by 50% between your resting and that 85, whatever that number is, when you're halfway between, and then you just go again. And so it's completely specific to you and your recovery. So the rest interval from interval 1 to interval 2 will be different from interval 7 to interval 8, for example.
You just gave away a secret. But yes, that is correct.
So, I mean,
yeah. That's, I do that as well. I take math, and it's what percentage of of recovery. 100% correct.
And then we all like, I mean, it's like where people's training schedule, you know, we like it to be 7 days a week and symmetrical and all these sort of things, but not necessarily every quality needs the same time and attention. But it's to be programmed in, like you might need more of, you know, like we talked about the posterior chain being so important for your guys, and how heavily that's emphasized. A lot of people, you know, they probably train in the gym their side delts as much as they train their posterior chain, because they're trying to hit everything exactly the same. But actually, you've got to realize, focus on the big rocks and the things that make a difference for you. And so, by the same token, your rest periods should be specific to you, rather than necessarily always going, I always rest exactly 60 seconds or whatever. Yeah,
the entire do CrossFit to be better at CrossFit notion that was around several years ago. If you want to be better at CrossFit, train at a high level, just do more CrossFit. That is complete BS now. It's not about that. So what happened is strength and conditioning coaches have gotten a hold of CrossFit, the sport. They've studied it, they've researched it, they figured it out. And now they've created ways, breaking it down, strength and conditioning's perspective, to be better at CrossFit. Just like you would break down soccer, rugby, like you were saying, same concept.
Yes, exactly. So now you're training for the event rather than the event being your training.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And so I still see a ton of programming out there. I'm kind of happy we're talking about this, because I sat on a soapbox about this a couple of weeks ago, but I see so many of these great, and don't get me wrong, they're amazing CrossFit athletes. They're amazing, putting out their own programming. And no offense, but no one says they're qualified as strength and conditioning coaches to put out programming. They're just good at CrossFit. And that's like me I played pro football, but that doesn't mean when I was playing football that I could coach another football player to be as good as I was. It just meant that I knew how to play football. Yeah. So what it is, when I look at this programming, I research all the time. You're never the best. You always have to learn. And I've looked at some amazing athletes in their programming. And all I see is WOD after WOD after WOD. And it's not going to make you better. It's just going to break you down, because there's no account to volume load based on your body, or lactic threshold based on your body, or, you know, the science behind who you are as an athlete. Mm-hmm. It's cool if you're just in your gym and you want to do some cool WOD, but it's not going to make you better if you're trying to get to the highest of levels. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And we, in an interview I did last week, it hasn't gone live yet, but with a guy called Steve Keen, we were talking about physique development, but also more about how there's the influencers online. They've got incredible physiques. They look great, but they put the program out, and as we were discussing then, and you've just said, they're not strength and conditioning coaches. They're not necessarily coaches in any realm, but they look the part, and as a result, lots of people buy their programs, which is, you can't blame the person buying that, but yeah, they don't have the science or the experience behind it. They just happen to be good at it. So yeah, they have PhDs in social media.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Yeah, we could all do that. If we want to boost our business, that would be handy for all of us.
Tom, you have a PhD in social media, but you actually have something behind it to bring to the table.
Maybe, but anyone who has been watching me, I had a few on my online clients check if I was okay, because I haven't posted anything on Instagram since January the 10th.
Oh wow!
And,
Okay.
And he's like, hey man, like, you know, all okay. I haven't seen any posts. I don't know if they've changed the algorithm and I'm not seeing your stuff. And I was like, no, it's I haven't put anything out there at the moment. I'm, you know, like I'm busy trying to coach you guys, you know, manage homeschooling, etc. Just wasn't really a priority now. I will get back to social media, absolutely, but it was one of those, in terms of my list of things I have to get done, I'm afraid it was quite low down. So
it falls down, but for some of these guys, that is their job.
Well,
and that's how they make money. And I respect it, because that's part of the world we live in social media. But if you're a consumer out there, that doesn't mean they know what they're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if I wasn't coaching people in person and online, and of course I would be, you know, and so social media was my main revenue, I wouldn't have been giving it up. So I completely understand where they're coming from, but I just thought it was an interesting one, that it's in all different realms of fitness, and, you know, all the different sort of little subcultures we have. It's a similar sort of thing. Like, those that are good aren't necessarily the best people to coach you. And again, I said this line, I stole this from a podcast I heard Tom Bilyeu, but he was like, people building the instruction manual should be people that have struggled to build the product. And I think it's the same thing with this. People have, like, you've thought deeply about, okay, how do I program this to get this, you know, not interfere with that, etc. And people that struggle to build muscle, those are the people who probably are going to be able to help you, rather than someone who it came easy to, or just a great athlete.
I couldn't agree more. Like that, you said that beautifully well.
Well, I stole it from someone else, but
well, he said it beautifully well.
Yeah, he did. When I heard it, I was like, oh, that's just perfect. And I think every time I try and steal the quote, I butcher it. But when he said it, I was like, that is money. That's absolutely on the money. But
amazingly said.
Yeah, it was really good. Okay, so you mentioned something else, like lactate threshold. That's a different thing. Now, there's some people will hit redline, and it won't be the cardiovascular system that's sort of letting them down in terms of, like, you know, that capacity. They're just like, I don't know, like locally they might just have such accumulation like that. You know, the sort of what everyone considers like, oh, the lactic acid and that burn. That I'm sure we're all familiar with those sensations. That's their limiting factor.
Yeah.
Now, if that's the case, how do we go around addressing that and helping that to not be the limiting factor?
How do we go around? So I'm sorry, let me phrase the question. So how do we go around the lactic threshold to work on zone training? Is that what you're saying?
So if lactic threshold is the limiting factor, what can we do to address that?
So lactic threshold is a whole other animal. And that's just really, so for those of you that don't know, lactic threshold is your ability to push out lactic acid in your system, and so you can recover, right? So anyone that's ever gone on like a hard assault bike ride, like a 3-minute max effort, everyone's done in their gym, or a Rogue Echo bike, or anything that's going to cause, like, mostly it's the bike that we can all relate to.
Yeah, I just vouch that thing's horrific.
And you feel that horrible pain in your legs, and you can't walk, and you're screaming, and you're like, you're never going to feel better. That's your lactic acid saying F you. And it's got to flush, but it needs to flush somewhere, right? So you have to find a way to work through that. And everyone's different. I like to just punch it in the mouth right away with athletes. And the way I like to work it, I'll say the nice way I like to work it is I like to do rowing repeats. So I have to do 10 by 500 meter rowing repeats. You're going to feel lactic acid in your legs, your butt, your biceps, your triceps quite a bit. But the more you do those repeats, the more you're going to work your body's system is going to start to learn how to flush the lactic acid out of your muscles. The mean way to do it is you put them on an assault bike, 4 by 20 calorie bike at max effort. Everything you got to 20 cals, I don't care what, just crush it with a 4-minute break in between. And you just watch them get in more and more pain after each one goes. And their legs get heavy, and I don't think I could do another one. There's no way, or you're crazy. And they do it. And it does 2 things. One, it teaches their body how to flush the lactic acid pretty quickly, because they're like, oh my gosh. Second, it makes them not afraid of trying to go to that point in a workout where they have lactic acid and they understand how to work through it. Now,
Mhm.
I wouldn't necessarily put your novice athlete through that. It's like you're going to put like your athlete that's trying to be a regional athlete, like athlete that has high expectations of being a great CrossFitter, OCR, etc. Put them through that, because this is what you need to be able to do. This is what it takes.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then once you've done that, there's other things I do. I have a whole list of things I do to people, but those are two really good ones.
Yeah. Okay. So just, I think it was worth people knowing that the difference between the two, and also maybe useful for them to recognize what their limiting factor is if they're not aware. So for example, like on the rower, I'm better at that than I am. Like I'm horrible on the assault bike. On the rower, if I had to do that 10 times 500, it would hurt, but it would most like I would get a fairly gnarly bit of lactic acid going, and really my glutes is where that really kicks in, like that horrible sensation there. But it would be like my aerobically, like heart and lungs would just be going crazy in the recovery. But that would feel like, to me, that would be the thing that would break down. Put me on the assault bike, that's not the issue. My legs basically just hit cement. They just like stop moving and they don't want to go anywhere. And knowing that's okay, so in this instance, this is what's holding me back, and this is what needs developing. So sorry, go ahead.
I don't recommend the assault bike for lactic acid or zone training until you're much more advanced.
Yeah,
I don't. I think it's awesome. It's a great technique, but you're gonna not get what you want out of the athlete until they're ready to do it.
Exactly. Well, it's one of those ones. It's just, I think you'll just get owned. Like you'll fail at the specific, or the target of the workout will not happen because you won't be able to achieve that. And so
exactly,
basically, the way you were talking about the addressing earlier, essentially coming back to principles, you sort of progressively overload people, and it's, people think about load on the bar, but you take like, okay, you can handle this now, and we're going to find a way to do a little bit more so that you body adapts and you can do more over time and you get better. But I think sometimes if you go in all guns blazing with this on a, like the assault bike like we have in the place where I'm training, like you just won't get the outcome or the stimulus you're looking for, because you'll fail and not be able to hit the protocol that's designed to create those that stimulus. So that's I think a good point for people to be aware of.
And then one thing I didn't mention about like working redline too, that I should just always say this, I don't know why I forget this, is if you are doing an OCR race and you're training, like you're doing like a WOD essentially the train, or like a CrossFit workout, sometimes just go for it. Just go all out, crush yourself, start off too hot, push it. It's training for a reason, and see how you do. Like push yourself to redline, fall apart, and see how you recover in the middle of the workout. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone's so afraid of, I want to win the workout, I want to have the highest score on the board. Who cares? If you're doing this to compete, then try new things and see how that goes. That is using CrossFit to get better at CrossFit in a sense. And it's an easy way to do it. Instead of you're just going to class, I'm just going to go to class. That's all I'm going to do. I have multiple athletes that do that. I have athletes that all they've done to go to regionals is take class in my gym. And I'll tell them, you're going to do what the guys weight today if you're a girl. Or I want you in the first 5 minutes to push as hard as you can and then figure it out. And you just train them accordingly to their time, that in that respect. Yeah.
That makes sense. And I think, specifically when you're dealing with CrossFit athletes, that'll be, if they learn from that experience, so valuable. They'll start understanding the signals and the sensations. It's a bit like, talking a bodybuilder, taking a set to true failure, say on a hack squat. Like most novices think they're at failure about a dozen reps from failure, but there's guys that, like, top level bodybuilders, they know they know what that feels like. They know. And then similar thing here, if you haven't pushed yourself there, you don't actually know how close to your capacity you are. So that's, I think, a very good tip, especially for people that are looking to take this to the high level. Not necessarily required for a beginner, but if you're looking to reach those higher levels, then you've got to go there a little bit, which brings me on to a point I was going to say. There's both mental and physical discomfort or sides to this. So there'll be, your body will be telling you you're done, but to some extent you've got more in the tank. And it's, again, I'm sure the guys and girls that are really top level have that mental fortitude to know, actually, this will pass, or I'll find a way to get some recovery in, down the road. It's coming soon. Again, I suppose training into these zones is one of the best ways to do that. But I'll cut you off there. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
I mean, like mental, I did a post about it the other day. Mental fortitude is sports in a nutshell, all sports. If you want to be the best, it comes down to mentally how you treat each day and how you treat each workout. Like I was putting my team through some training for the team quarterfinals, and one of the things I made them do was hold a row for ready for a specific workout, hold a row at a pace that I wanted, and then I made them do 60 unbroken wall balls. And they would, when they dropped the ball, I'm like, why'd you drop the ball? And they'd be like, well, it hurt. I'm like, did it hurt? But could you mentally have kept going? And a lot of the times it's just pain, but it's not like you're going to fail. It's a mental thing. Well, that's too many reps. This hurts. And so it's about pushing through that mental zone, saying, I can do this if I have to. And that is something that it's hard to do. Like if it says, I'll program unbroken reps. I'll say, I want this unbroken. I want you to rest long enough to do 60 wall balls unbroken. I don't care how long you have to rest to do it, just do it. And really, it's not, their time isn't much different whether they rested longer and gone unbroken versus broken them up. The difference was they mentally said, I'm going to do 60 unbroken now. That's it. Yeah. And it's the whole point of it is mental. And then you throw in pacing. Hey, I want you to hold a 500 meter row at a 145 pace per 500. I can't do that. Why? Because you don't want to. You can, but you have to rest long enough to make sure you can hold it. And then the time's almost the same. So you have to give them goals to say, I want you to hold this pace. I want you to do this many reps. And you break down workouts for them so that they have to go unbroken. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's great. And but that's also the skill, art, and experience of a really good coach there coming through and using those tools to get the desired outcome. So I think that's really useful for people. Now, so we talked about these things and how they apply to CrossFit. And I mentioned earlier on, I also want to, not necessarily these exact training modalities, but just the idea that if you do more than sort of 5 reps, it's cardio, and there's no part of that if you're trying to get big and strong. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things to me, the aerobic system is the system of recovery. So to some extent, you're going to need some element of recovery. Now, you don't necessarily need to be an elite level CrossFitter, but you do need some in there. So if we're talking to people who now, getting as strong as possible, or getting, bodybuilding type thing, like physique type goals, some people will be like, never do any cardiovascular activity or any conditioning type work. Where would you fall on that? What's your opinion of conditioning elements for them? Should they be in there? If they are, what maybe would you recommend?
So should you condition if you're a bodybuilder versus like a weightlifter? Okay. So like, here's what I tell everybody. This is my best example for you. If aliens took over the planet and you had to run from them, could you get away? So I might be the biggest, baddest looking, sexiest guy on the stage with my abs and my biceps, but I had to run away. I had to run a mile to get away from this alien invasion. Could you do that and not get caught? And if you can't, you're out of shape. I don't care how good you look. You should have basic cardiovascular ability within you. So yes, you should be doing cardio. And I'm not saying like they should be like based on their sport, they should be doing tons of it. But like if you're a weightlifter, for example, and you're out of breath after doing 3 max snatches, and you have a 10-minute break before you have to go into clean and jerk, and you can't breathe, then you're out of shape. You don't have the recovery system to be able to do the clean and jerks now. So if you're a bodybuilder, same concept. It's about recovery system. So if I'm going to go from these poses on the stage and then have to do these poses later on, that takes a lot out of you. And if you don't have the cardiovascular system to recover and do it, then you're out of shape. Mm-hmm. So you need to have some cardio. Now, every sport's going to have a different specific amount of it they should be doing, but you should be doing some. I recommend at least 20 to 25 minutes a week, depending on who you are as an athlete. Obviously, CrossFitters and runners are going to have more. Bodybuilders are going to have less. Weightlifters are going to have probably in the middle between a bodybuilder and a CrossFitter, but you should be doing it at least once or twice a week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. And I think, so in terms of if we're going with zones, what, you're thinking like that low, hold a conversation type zone twice a week?
Yeah, zone two training for, I would highly recommend like up to 40 minutes, but zone 2 training at least for 25 minutes minimum twice a week, and you're good to go. Do it as a warm up, whatever. Zone 2 training for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we're on the same page there. So I think that's the key thing. I think people have almost got to the opinion though that they take the lift or the escalator everywhere they go. They drive. You drive as close to the door of everywhere you're going, and you like kind of walk as slowly as possible. Don't get, if you get your heart rate up, you'll go catabolic.
Yep.
All of this sort of stuff. Whereas, actually it might just be a case of you get out for a good brisk walk a few times a week, or a hike, depending where you live, that sort of thing. But then you're just taking care, well, longevity wise, it's a good idea to take care of the cardiovascular system. But also, I think a base level of conditioning, if you're a bodybuilder, at some point training with relatively high volumes is going to be beneficial to you. If you haven't even got the conditioning to handle a high volume, up chest and back, or whatever session, if you're gassed by that, then you are limiting your capacity to build muscle because you can't handle that much volume.
Yeah, you can't. And that's another thing. If you're, let's be honest, the guys at the top of the sport in any of these sports we've mentioned, they have cardiovascular. They do. I don't care what you think they look like. Trust me, they're athletic.
Yeah.
And they, it's people that are, I think when you say with the way you were saying it, I'm imagining people in their gyms just going to the local global gym, doing bodybuilding as their program and not really doing anything else.
Yeah.
They're not in shape.
I think that's a genuine thing. And I think maybe from the people I know, it's less of a thing. I would say definitely positive. And perhaps it was like the guys that consider themselves powerlifters. They literally, like, is almost like they had the squat rack, a seat, and then if they weren't squatting, they were like either lying down or sitting on that seat. The rest periods were like 8 minutes between sets, and then they drove to and from. Like, the cardio was a dirty word, and if anything that elevated their heart rate was bad. But if you get out of breath tying your shoelaces, that's a pretty bad place to be, right? But I think it also applies to some extent. There seems to be this area of the bodybuilding community that I've got there. Now, I mean, I may be guilty of that because I deal with largely skinny guys that struggle to build muscle. So I'll be telling them, looking through their schedule, and it's like, actually, while you were playing a game of football, you went for a 10K run, you did this, you did that, you're out on your bike for 3 hours, for your goals, we're actually overdoing this a little bit. And then I think that potentially that gets misconstrued to like, don't do any. And people, I suppose people like to polarize opinion as well. So people jump off the deep end and they're like, do any cardio or kill your gains.
Mm-hmm. And the whole cardio gains thing. I mean, like, you brought up a great example. You brought up strongman, right? Look at Eddie Hall, UK, right? He's UK. Amazing. He's one of my favorite strongmen to watch. I can watch that guy on Netflix all day long. He's entertaining. He's awesome. He's a hell of an athlete. Same with Brian Shaw and like all those guys. And do you think those guys don't have great cardio? These guys are moving tractors 100 feet. Like, they have to have great cardio to pump that kind of blood through their heart with that kind of load on their spot, on their CNS. They have to be athletic. They have cardio. It's just short bursts because it takes so much energy to do what they do. And so they're incredibly in shape.
Actually, I love the fact you mentioned that. So it's one of the ways in terms of getting buy-in with people. Their cardio sessions look like weighted sled, like backward drag.
Awesome.
Farmer's walk, and as you said earlier, like, we set a time limit on it. They go at a pace they can hold, but they maintain that for X amount of time. And it's amazing how when that's your cardio, all of a sudden people are, I'm in. This is cool.
I'm in. This is great.
But again, that's one of those ways you're like, well, this is going to benefit you. So how can we make it? How can we get you excited and amped up to do it? And then when they're excited by that, they put the effort in, and they commit to it and do it. It stays in the schedule. I
do a ton of CrossFit, a ton of strongman. With my CrossFit athletes, ton of it. And it's such a beneficial thing. Even my private clients, it's so beneficial. It works so well. It is cardio and it's lifting and it's fun and it's different. Not everyone, like I said, it's not sexy to get on a bike and ride it for 40 minutes. It just isn't. People don't like it, but it's the most efficient way to get in shape. It just is.
So when you're doing your strongman stuff, they've got the heart rate monitor on and we're keeping them in a certain zone. You're using the zones as well. How are you doing that? Or are you just you're programming that differently?
I use strongman training for power output work. So I want to see their power output. So like, it's more like a salt bike sprints into like a sandbag clean or a sandbag carry or a sandbag hold. Like, let's just say I had them sprint 100 meters and their heart rate's super high. And then I make them hold 157-pound sandbag in the front position. I can't breathe, but that's called recovery.
Yeah.
Can you recover with this thing on your chest? Yes, I can. Okay, good. Or I can't. This sucks. All right.
I bet also there's a bunch of people listening now going, okay, that sounds like the sort of thing I can get behind. I'm not getting in a spin class, but I can do that.
But even a spin class, man, I taught spin, so I get it. But like you can do a spin class for a whole bunch of times and go out there and do a strongman workout, and you're a heck of a day you put together for training.
Oh yeah. Well, I
You
mean, yeah,
know,
that stuff's not easy. It's
not at all.
just as you say, it's not sexy. Not sexy. Well, it
Not
depends who
sexy.
not when I do it anyway. It's not.
Yeah. Athletes don't like things that aren't fun. And I really think that's why I think the main reason why CrossFit took off all those years ago and got so successful, because it was different every single day. You were getting people to do cardio, whether they realized it or not. 30 clean and jerks for time, Grace, is cardio. It's a lot of reps for time. Your heart rate's going to be up. It's like, it stinks. It's not necessarily taking a spin class, but throwing in a spin class with that is also great too. It just depends on who you are. And that's why CrossFit took off, because it was always a different thing all the time. That was essentially cardio.
Yeah, exactly. I can get behind that. I can see the appeal. I mean, that's 100% true. Now, so let's bring that back to a point you made earlier. So if you want to be the best CrossFit athlete, though, you don't just do CrossFit as in random stuff. It's not randomization. To be the best, there's a logical thought process. It can still be varied. I'm sure you've got. I'm sure the training week of your athletes. There's a reason. There's quite a lot of variety within that week.
There is.
But it's not just throwing random stuff, because I just want to make sure people get that front and center. Variety for variety's sake may be fun, but it isn't going to make you a better athlete.
Yeah, my programming, and all great coaches that I've seen, their programming is not random at all. It is extremely structured. Like I have a calendar of my athletes. I just started Precision's new programming cycle yesterday. 16 weeks is block 1, cycle 1, base cycle building. Cycle 2 is going to be building on top of that with a lot more gymnastic specific work and prep for the open. And then the cycle 3 will be open prep, a lot more volume, because the open focuses on literally 12 movements over and over and over again. So you only work those 12 movements. So it's cycle 3, for example, is a much shorter cycle than cycles 1 and 2, because I don't want to overload them with the same stuff forever, because then they're going to compete for 3 weeks doing that same stuff. Yep. And then I really think the funnest cycle is for the advanced athletes is I guess we'll say it games prep, which is essentially going to be those going to the semifinals or goes into the games. A lot of fun, different stuff, getting in lakes, swimming in pools, strongman work, sled work. It's anything that's fitness they're going to do. Whereas, the first 3 weeks or first 3 cycles are really specific to being on a computer, being scored in a 4x4 box. Yeah. And that's a little different. So programming is very specific to the athlete and what they need based on a coach. And it's honestly, my athletes do WODs, but they spend way more time doing accessory and weightlifting in the first cycle than you could imagine.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think important for people to hear. If their aspirations to compete in CrossFit, definitely take that on board. Like I said, I wanted to keep this a relatively tight episode, so I think you've dropped loads of knowledge bombs for people there. We'll wrap things up there. Maybe we'll get back on for another one. Maybe do a Q&A if people are got specific questions for Mike. Drop him an email to tom@breakingmuscle.com, or just hit me on the DMs on Instagram at Tom McCormick. And we'll set aside a time. We'll go over some listener questions. I think that'd be cool for people. Get them if you're game for that, some specific answers. But Mike, again, give us a chance to find out where people can find out more about you, where to get in touch, get into your world.
Yeah, guys. So you can find me on Instagram. It's just at Tromello, MTROMELLO. Pretty simple. You could also find me at my gym's website, precisioncrossfit.net. Pretty easy. You can also find me on Facebook, Mike Tromello, and email. If you want to email me any questions, just do precision.crossfitinfo@gmail.com. It'll go directly to me, or you can just DM me on Instagram. I'll let you know. If I answer, I'll do my best.
And if you send any questions to me, I'll just forward them on to Mike, and
forward them and I'll answer.
He can do the hard stuff. Okay, cool. All right, Mike, thanks so much for taking the time to chat. That was really, really good. We'll look forward to doing this again.
Thanks for having me, Tom. I enjoyed it.